So while I was trawling through Twitter, because I rarely check it and I really should, I noticed my friend Foxy tweeted about a man who had been discharged from the army. This had me intrigued. What on earth could someone do to be discharged? Now the title of the article that she linked certainly implied that political belief played a part in it. The subsequent fallout was all rather amusing, to be honest. It's quite astonishing how people are so willing to just jump on the bandwagon and call someone anything other than a patriot for expressing a political view, regardless of how amusing it actually is. That all aside, I thought today we could devote an entire video to Spenser Rapone, who is the subject of the subsequent Fox article that Foxy linked. But we're not just going to focus on that article, because there are many others. We are also going to look at his own Twitter, along with his own blog, because there are a couple of quotes from it that I could cherry pick the living hell out of that amuse me quite a bit. So first of all, let's start with the Fox article. The West Point graduate, who last year posed in a picture holding a cap that had "Communism Will Win" written inside, is officially out of the US Army with an other than honourable discharge. Now for those who don't know, other than honourable is a form of administrative discharge. This type of discharge represents a departure from the conduct and performance expected of all military members. People who receive this are barred from re-enlisting to any component of the armed forces, including Reserve and National Guard. They also are ineligible to receive a GI Bill. There's your education for the day. Let's continue with the Fox article. He is no longer part of the US military after top brass at Fort Drum's 10th Mountain Division accepted his resignation Monday after an earlier warning for conduct unbecoming of an officer. Army officials condemned the cadet last year and opened an investigation into his social media activity. Second Lieutenant Rapone's actions in no way reflect the values of the US Military Academy or the US Army. Now, after receiving his other than honourable discharge, Mr. Rapone showed some true class by saluting Fort Drum. And to move away from this, I thought we'd go through a little back history about the man, because he does in fact talk about his upbringing and his experience in the military, and all of this is quite relevant to paint a certain picture. One of 6 children growing up in Newcastle, Pennsylvania, Rapone said he applied to West Point, which is tuition-free, because he could not afford college. He was nominated out of high school by then US Representative Jason Altmaier in 2010. Rapone was not accepted to West Point, so he enlisted. He was then deployed to Afghanistan in 2011 and was assigned as an assistant machine gunner in Khost Province. "We were bullies in one of the poorest countries on earth," Rapone said. "We have one of the most technologically advanced militaries of all time, and all we were doing is brutalizing and invading and terrorizing a population that had nothing to do with what the United States claimed was a threat." Towards the end of his deployment, he learned that West Point fulfills a certain quota of enlisted soldiers every year. Despite his growing disillusionment about the military, he applied and got in. Now, Rudy, as he's more commonly known on Twitter, has said that his journey to communism grew out of his experiences as an army ranger in Afghanistan before he was accepted into the US Military Academy, and those views only hardened during his studies of history as one of the Academy's long grey line. He explained that he took the offended selfies in his May 2016 West Point grad ceremony and kept them to himself until last September, when he treated them in a solidarity with NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick, who is taking heat for kneeling for the national anthem to raise awareness of racism. Many other military personnel did tweet also in favour of Kaepernick, although most were supporting free speech, not communism. Now, to paint a small picture about Rudy here, in a number of pictures he shows his support for communism, but then he contradicts it with this picture here, which if anything serves to highlight how similar communism and socialism are. Seize the means of production, right. It's one of those typically progressive things, isn't it? To claim to be a socialist but actually be a communist. Hardly a surprise. And when I first saw the article, the first thing that occurred to me, the Fox article that is, I thought he was just being an edgy boy. Just doing it because maybe he lost a bet. Wearing a shirt with Che Guevara on, though, not so much. And while many could argue he was a revolutionary, he was a fucking terrible person. Now, with regards to his comments about Afghanistan, from what I remember, it was direct retaliation for the September the 11th attacks in 2001, with its aim to be to dismantle Al-Qaeda, and to then deny it a safe base of operations in Afghanistan by removing the Taliban from power. Granted, there are a number of things that went down that should never have happened. I will agree, and perhaps it is unfortunate that you got to see the more barbaric aspects of it. And for all we know, you held these political beliefs from the offset. They just cemented over time. And there's nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with having a political view. Much like there is nothing truly wrong with me mocking you for being a communist and a socialist. I hope you see the irony in it, I guess. And to address all the criticism he got since for the reason he resigned, and the criticism he received while in the military, he is free to express his political views any way he wants. But then of course the argument is, should he be allowed to do that while in uniform? That is obviously down to the rules presented by the US military. If he broke the rules, then of course not. And that's one of the points about being a soldier, because that's what he was. Obviously he desperately wanted to be one, so much so that he applied to West Point on more than one occasion. But even then, once his political viewpoint had cemented, he was going to be a bit of a dick. Although I will say it was quite amusing to troll through Twitter to the hashtag Spenser Rapone and note how many people were just going on about how unpatriotic it is. The very simple argument is, it was free speech. Of course it was, free expression. But of course the circumstance of it is the point. If it falls outside of regulation, then of course he's in trouble, as I've already stated. Now because I thought it was quite amusing, I went trawling through his social media and I found his blog posts, and one of them stood out and it made me chuckle. It's called Commentary on the Concept of Enlightenment. Despite years of supposed progress, both technological and social, we remain slaves to capital. Well, we do quite like the idea of rewards for doing things, subjected to a dull daily routine within a prescribed division of labour. That sounds eerily familiar to any system. It's just how you paint it. One of them looks free, the other one accompanies a hammer and sickle, and the other one's communism, of course. Max Horkheimer and Theodore Adorno's Dialect of Enlightenment outlines how the desire to enlighten human beings merely reproduced domination and oppression, leading to our current alienated state. It is quite a divided one, I'll give you that. Contextualizing their work specifically, its dour tone of course reflects that of its publication in 1947. Adorno and Horkheimer's work demonstrates how the likes of Hitler, Mussolini, etc. were in many ways the logical conclusion of Enlightenment thought. They did not exist as an aberration, but were in the spirit of other oppressive Enlightenment figures and regimes. When one takes into account the genocidal impulses of the British Empire in India or the same of the United States with regards to indigenous peoples, this picture becomes much more clear. Francis Bacon's edict of knowledge is power is far more than a pithy musing. With the comments of were in many ways the logical conclusion of Enlightenment thought, and associating that to Hitler and Mussolini, part of me really wanted to play the edgy boy meme, you know, that Dankula clip, but I figured just leaving it on its own because of how truly thought-provoking, let's go with that, it was. It would seem inappropriate for me to continue reading this because we now know how truly deranged he is. To an extent, I will agree that arguments can be made for thought, perhaps not the logical conclusion of Enlightenment. Let's just go with thought. But then again, it also shows a weakness in your own historical knowledge because Hitler was a protest vote, essentially. He was the consequence of it. You piss enough people off, they will vote for him. Well, they did back then anyway. And Mussolini, well, he certainly didn't get in because of his good looks. Let's finish on the Fox article, because I don't want to dawdle on this too long, as it is quite amusing to understand who he is. He also remains committed to the far-left causes, saying he considers himself a revolutionary socialist and urged others to join him in his revolution. I would encourage all soldiers who have a conscience to lay down their arms and join me, and so many others who are willing to stop serving the agents of imperialism and join us in a revolutionary movement. First of all, if a soldier is carrying a weapon, and you tell them to lay down their arms and they are not allowed to, but they do it anyway, they kind of get into trouble for that. And this is something I don't think you understand. The policies and the political ideas you support require authoritarianism. Your previous occupation, yes, had that. In fact, you followed orders because that was your damn job to. Now, there are people like Marco Rubio who support your departure, who is quoted saying, while in uniform, Spenser Rapone advocated for communism and political violence, and express support and sympathy for enemies of the United States. I am glad to see that they have given him an other than honourable discharge. It won't look particularly good on your CV, and I fully expect to see you in the job centre very soon. Oh, and to conclude this, Spenser Rapone said, I knew there could be repercussions. Of course, my military career is dead in the water. On the other hand, many people reached out and showed me support. There are a lot of veterans both active duty and not that feel like I do. That made literally no sense. I'm going to say I support your right to be able to express your political ideas, but since being in the military was your occupation, you chose a very poor time to do that. And you are their representative. The military stands for certain values. Your values directly contradicted that, which raises a few questions as to why you even wanted to join in the first place. I mean, if we exclude the free tuition, that is. Anyway, Spenser Rapone, good luck with your future. I hope the motherland calls you soon. I hope everyone has a lovely Wednesday, and thank you all for listening. Okay, we're not entirely done. There was one little remark I thought we would touch upon for a moment, because I didn't have time to read the entire book that he referenced that was initially released in 1944, not 1947, and that would be The Dialect of Enlightenment, which received a number of criticisms, most notably from Charles Lemert, who discussed in his book Social Theory that Horkheimer and Adorno lacked sufficient sympathy for the cultural plight of the average working person, unfair to criticize the taste of ordinary people, and that popular culture does not really buttress social conformity and stabilize capitalism as much as the Frankfurt School thinks. I will of course leave a link to The Dialect of Enlightenment and of course Social Theory if you are at all interested in reading those. I fully intend to later today. Thank you.
Oh, goddowns.
Imagine my shock.